Zulfi Bhutto of Pakistan, His Life and Times by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 7 Winters of His Discontent, 1965 to 1969. Zulfi hoped that Ayub's illness and the rapidly deteriorating economic situation that was doing so much to contribute to popular unrest would convince Ayub that he had better step down. Elections could then be held that would bring his People's Party to power, at least in the West. His party's manifesto and program were designed to appeal to Pakistanis of every region, Bengali peasants and workers, as much as Sindhis. The latter, however, spoke Bhutto's language and understood that his all power to the people meant, first of all, the people of Larkana and Sindh. Zulfi addressed the first Sindh provincial convention of his new party on 21st September 1968 in Hyderabad, telling the delegates of Ayub's shameless lack of faith when his government fell at the feet of the great powers by accepting the 1965 ceasefire. My brothers, I wanted to resist Pakistan's enemy, but my opponents dubbed my patriotic feelings as emotionalism. After coming back from Tashkent, wherever I went, the people received me with affection. They asked me scores of questions on seeing tears in my eyes, but I could not tell them what befell my dear motherland. My silence was exploited as cowardice. As a matter of fact, I am neither a coward nor emotional. I had kept quiet only because the enemy forces were looking for a suitable opportunity. I knew that a single sentence from my mouth could spark off a civil war in the country. I remained silent to avoid a civil war. But now that years have passed, I cannot remain silent. Brothers, I am proud of having been trained politically by the ever conscious patriotic people of Pakistan. They are my real teachers. This is why the politics of the people and humility are in my character. Humility hardly seemed the appropriate word for someone who had just said that a single sentence from my mouth could spark off a civil war. Zulfi went on, I am not greedy for wealth. I never unduly drew a single penny from the national treasury for my own person. In the land reforms, my family surrendered its 40,000 acres of fertile land for the people. Today, the government accuses me of having taken an undue advantage of my official position. I challenge all individuals who have been associated with the government to declare their assets before they entered the government and as these assets now stand. I will do the same. He called out to Ayub in particular. Come on, Mr. President, let us both take the initiative and account for our past and present assets. Let us tell the nation what you had before you became president and about all that I had before becoming a minister. Let the people know what you gained and what I lost while in office. Are you willing to do that? I could have amassed wealth like you have done. Pakistanis love courage and admire heroics. Most of those who heard Zulfi Bhutto speak in 1968 loved and admired him for his fearless challenges to the giants of Pindi, Lahore, London, and New York. A charge of criminal conspiracy had been filed that year against Zulfikar Ali Bhutto for having hired government tractors at low concessional rates to clear more than 100 acres of land he owned in Larkana, some of which he supposedly held illegally, conspiring to get his servants and distant or junior family members to say they were the owners. Friends and elders, I am a human being, Zulfi admitted to the delegates then. I can make mistakes, but I am not guilty of any impropriety. I never took undue advantage of my office as minister. However, I have committed one sin, and that is that I have been associated with this government for 8 years. Although I served the country to the best of my capacity, If, like other ministers, I wished to have my own factories and bank balance abroad, I could have done all that so easily. To hire tractors at half the fixed rate would be like picking up pennies after passing up pounds. Once a representative of a big power took me by my arm and said, Mr. Bhutto, you will get anything you wish, provided you make some adjustments. I jerked my arm away and said, Never try to do this again. If you have purchased a few mean individuals, you should not think that everyone in Pakistan is a Mir Jafar. I am not like those who have acted against national interests and stacked away funds. When I narrated this incident to the president, he paid tributes to me, but I would like to ask him now whether this is the reward for those tributes. The Videro Khan Bhutto part of his felt grossly betrayed by Ayub and angry that such petty charges should be filed against him. A few wretched half-rate tractors. How small-minded of Ayub, who so often had dined at his table, slept in his finest guest house, hunted his wild boar and birds. Bhutto's generous feudal heart, his noble spirit, could not understand such betrayal, so petty an attack, except as a desperate ploy to tarnish his name and thereby undermine his party's potent challenge. My brothers, the Pakistan People's Party is a principled ideological party, but the government has resorted to personal vindictiveness. We speak of principles. The government orders. The tractor's case against me, we mention socialism. The government orders that we should be detained under DPR, Defense of Pakistan rules. We demand justice for the people of Balochistan. Instructions are given to arrest Akbar Bukti. We say the people want democracy. It is said the basic democracies are good enough. We demand food and clothing for the people. They give us bullets and beatings. Tell us, Khan Sahab, which of us has trampled on democracy, you or me? If this situation continues, the people will rise in rebellion and there will be bloodshed and civil war in the country. I am not prophesying, it is logic. I might be accused of spreading rebellion. Well, I will do that if needed. I fear no one. Prison for preaching rebellion would be preferable to the ignominy of being locked up for conspiring to misuse tractors. So he hurled another stone, this time at Ayub Khan Sahab, shouting his name and, I am not a coward. I cannot be browbeaten. I am not scared of your guns. Come on, take up your guns. I have the power of the people with me. It is more powerful than an atom bomb. I have burnt my boats for democracy and socialism. I will not let you sit in peace. Zulfi had taken off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. He was clenching his fists, showing the stuff he was made of, ready to stand his ground and take on any giant. As the fearless Qaid-e-Awam, 40 years young, he was ready to take on the entire establishment. Dear brothers, as justice is hard to get in a country where there is no rule of law, you remain at the mercy of bureaucrats, a class holding the reins of the government in its cruel and blood-stained hands. The government keeps on harping about my isolation, claims I have no friends, but the poor people are in fact with me. God is with me. Faced though he was with criminal prosecution, Zulfi stood ready to lead the march towards economic justice, insisting that socialism must be adopted to make Pakistan a real democracy. His party's program included demands for abolition of feudalism, protection of the rights of peasants and laborers, their right to strike, nationalization of all key and basic industries, nationalization of transport, and nationalization of education. My dear friends, it is said that I am a wealthy man and a feudal lord. It is said that I have no right to struggle for socialism without distributing my wealth among the people. Socialism can be introduced only when all means of production are brought under state control. But even so, I hereby announce that if my wealth can be of any good to the nation, I will not hesitate to give it away. But I cannot be so foolish as to hand my wealth over to the capitalists and feudalists under the capitalistic system, so as to enable the rulers to make more money and spend more on their luxuries. Well, if the government is courageous enough to introduce socialism, it is welcome to do so. I will be the first man to place my wealth under national control. He paused as if only just hearing what he had said, reflecting on the implications of his promise as it echoed in his mind. Then, more soberly, but you cannot fool the people by such useless arguments. I believe in socialism. That is why I have left my class and joined the laborers, peasants, and poor students. I love them and what I can get from them except affection and respect. No power on earth can stop socialism, the symbol of justice, equality, and the supremacy of man, from being introduced in Pakistan. It is a demand of time and history, and you can see me raising this revolutionary banner among the masses. I am a socialist and an honest socialist who will continue to fight for the poor till the last moment of his life. Some ridicule me for being a socialist. I don't care. Such was the dialogue Zulfi had allowed with himself. He had read enough French and Russian history to know something about revolutions that had racked both lands, changing the polity of Europe. And he had read enough Marxist tracts to know something about socialism. But Zulfi compared himself most with those Ahle Quraysh who rejected worldly riches and lined up behind the Prophet of Islam in order to spread the message of liberty, equality, and peace. I only want to bring about a revolution in Pakistan. Presidential elections were to be held in the winter of 1969 to 1970. But Ayub had recovered strength enough to fly to London for medical treatment and had decided not to run. Zulfi's campaign trail took him from Hyderabad through the northwest frontier, Ayub's home province, where he continued to launch fearless attacks against the ailing dictator. I'm not afraid of you. Why don't you put me in jail? If you put me in jail, the people will turn you out of the government. You are running your government with force and suppression. We are struggling for democracy and we shall continue to struggle. 22 families have usurped the economic resources of the whole country. It was said before martial law that there were 600 zamindars and out of them only 200 were ruling the country. Now, a score of families wield power. Even in America, the center of capitalism, such a wretched system does not exist. We demand justice and fair play. That October, Ayub was celebrating his decade of revolution. Zulfi insisted it was time to start a true people's revolution. They accuse me of lust for power and say that is why I am opposing this government. Zulfi told a public meeting in Abbottabad on 29th October 1968. It is this government which is drunk with power, brothers. I have committed mistakes in my life. I am a human being, and to err is human. But for my sins and blunders, I shall repent before my Creator and beg forgiveness. I shall not go to the president. My greatest mistake has been that I was associated with this government. They have sucked the blood of entire country. They have usurped the wealth of the whole nation. It does not lie in their mouth to accuse us. By early November, the People's Party had gained supporters and momentum wherever its popular leader had spoken. First in Sherpao, then Peshawar, Zulfi kept jumping onto platforms, ripping off his jacket or vest, exciting West Pakistanis to cheer as he pugnaciously attacked the tottering Ayub and his ancient regime. Zulfi told his mass audience in Peshawar, "The people have no place in the government. The military rules here. It is nevertheless a weak government. How can it be a powerful government when all its policies are anti people? It is a government of cannibals. It ate up Khwaja Nazimuddin and Soharwardi. I do not want to name Madre Millat, and still it feels hungry. But it will not be able to eat me." His facial expressions and body language showed even more than his words the contempt he felt for the fading dictator he'd long advised and assisted. Prices are sky high. None of the basic necessities of life are available. Yet, it is argued that the country has made tremendous progress and that there is stability. What stability? The stability of the graveyard? He continued to attack government for having filed criminal charges against him. Zulfi felt his messianic destiny was no less than to awaken the masses and eliminate poverty and misery. He challenged the government to arrest him, indeed, even to kill him if they wish, fearlessly insisting that he was determined to expose them. Was he not, after all, Zulfikar, the righteous sword of martyred Caliph Hazrat, friend of Allah? Ayub saw by now that there was nothing he could do to silence Bhutto short of arresting or shooting him. 5 days later, when the president came to Peshawar to address a government rally, he was shouted down by angry young Wali Khan and Bhutto supporters and actually shot at. Ayub beat an undignified and rapid retreat. Zulfi by then had rolled onto Rawalpindi, where Mustafa Khar and Mumtaz Bhutto were waiting for him at the Intercontinental Hotel. Thousands of students, many from neighboring Gordon College, had just been chased from the Intercontinental lawn by police. Pindi was the site of the Army's general headquarters, so crowds of raucous students were not welcome there, especially on the anniversary of the Russian Revolution. When I arrived at the Hotel Intercontinental, I found the whole mall area thick with tear gas smoke. Zulfi later recalled. About 1.5 hours after my arrival, I received a telephone call from the Polytechnic informing me that the police had opened fire there, resulting in the death of a student, Abdul Hamid. I was told that the students were insisting on taking the body to the president's house and that they wanted me to lead the procession. Zulfi advised restraint, sending some People's Party lieutenants to the college several miles up the road to explain why he could not risk coming himself. Advocate Khurshid Hassan Mir drove with him the next day to offer condolences to Abdul Hamid's parents, and on the following morning, Mir was arrested. Zulfi entrained that day with Mumtaz and Khar for Lahore, where an army of People's Party devotees, including his old comrade, Dr. Mubashir, awaited him at the packed station. In an interval of less than a year, Zulfi had roused most of West Pakistan, bringing its young men from a state of apathy or despair to the brink of righteous revolt against the military dictator and his major pillars of support. He had set Sindh on fire, stirred the frontier, and taken Pindi by the storm. Yet it was Lahore, Zulfi knew, that was the true testing ground for any man who hoped to lead Pakistan. Since the dawn of Mughal imperial rule in the early 16th century, Lahore had been the heartbeat of Punjab, and Punjab was not only the initial capital letter of Pakistan, but the premier province of its west wing. Qaid-e-Azam Jinnah had known that, which was why he had insisting on holding his Muslim League meeting in Lahore in March 1940, where the prophetic Pakistan resolution was adopted as the battle cry single platform of Muslim India's premier party. Now, Qaid-e-Awam, Bhutto, was ready to bring his own political revolt to its boil, to launch his last push in Lahore. He took the jacket from his back and threw it into the cheering, almost worshipful crowd of frenzied young men who looked to him as more than a political leader. He was the stuff two martyrs and Mahdis were made of. There was fire not only in his speech but in his bloodshot, bulbous eyes that rarely closed, hardly ever rested anymore. Sleep had abandoned Zulfi by now. The colors he had chosen for his people's party flag, red, black, and green, were the colors of the Prophet and of Ali's martyred sons, Hassan and Hussein, the colors of Islam itself the world over. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had, in this year of frenetic campaigning and ceaseless oratory, transformed himself into a living symbol of Islamic sainthood, a fiery shaheed ready to sacrifice his wealth, his life, and every drop of his blood for his people and their land of the pure, and for Islam in the sacred service of God Almighty. He had come back to Lahore more than 2 years later. After his eloquent silence and tear-filled eyes alone had spoken of Ayub's betrayal in Kashmir and Tashkent to 100,000 or more young men who gathered at the railway station hanging from precarious perches like bats in midday, filling every platform tightly locked together on every step just to catch a glimpse of this Shaheed. Yes, here at last was a political saint born in Pakistan. Here was the flesh that Sufi saint Lal Shahbaz was made of, the spirit that gave Shias the world over strength to flagellate themselves mercilessly with chains of steel, yet feel no pain, only the ultimate soul searing pleasure of surrender, Islam, to God. There were, Zulfi told them, in the 45 minutes of Urdu fire that poured that day from his drooping martyr's lips in Lahore, only 12 months and 19 days left to Ayub's dying dictatorship. The lion crowd sent its approval in so deep-throated a roar that it reached the president's house in Pindi, 160 miles away. Ayub, awakened by the sound, called his giant governor Musa, ordering him to arrest that crazy young troublemaker. Musa signed the order to detain Zulfikar Ali Bhutto under Rule 32 of the Defense of Pakistan Rules on 12th November 1968. Bhutto was charged with creating disaffection to bring into hatred and contempt the government of Ayub Khan. In the early hours of 13th November, Zulfi was arrested at the home of Dr. Mubashir Hassan, who was also taken into custody together with Mumtaz Ali Bhutto. They were flown to Miawali jail, a prison fortress on the bank of the Indus. I was confined in an old cell full of rats and mosquitoes, Zulfi reported in his affidavit to the High Court of Lahore. The charpai bed was tied to a chain. There was an adjoining little room meant for toilet purposes, but it was so dirty it was repulsive to enter. The food consisted of 2 chapatis made of red wheat with dal which had stones in it, or 2 tiny pieces of meat. A strong light shone for 24 hours throughout my stay there, making sleep at night extremely difficult. He was kept in solitary confinement and given no writing paper until 18th November, although he had made that immediate request. Nor were letters or telegrams delivered to his cell, the first but not the last or the worst prison cell Zulfikar Bhutto would be forced to inhabit before he died. This morning, some ringleaders of this movement of lawlessness have been arrested. General Musa announced the day the Bhuttos were jailed. He would brook no further disorder. There is a limit to everything. As word spread through Lahore of the Qaid-e-Awam's arrest, students and young workers rioted throughout the streets and alleyways of the old city. Down the rail line at Multan, thousands had gathered on the tracks and station platforms to greet their hero, but instead heard the news of his arrest. Trains were soon being stoned and cars ransacked as the frustrated faithful searched in vain for their Qaid-e-Awam. Barrister Bhutto rejected all charges filed against him as a tissue of lies, malicious in intent and dishonest in purpose. My utterances and remarks, made extemporaneously in the course of long speeches, made in many places, have been deliberately torn out of context and even fabricated. He denied having disclosed any state secrets, having incited the masses or students to break any laws or to take violent actions, having conspired to plan or plot the overthrow of Ayub's government by force. That figment of government's imagination was but a symptom of its ailing condition. The voices raised in the streets were a spontaneous verdict by the people against the government's excesses, corruption, and self purposes, proof positive of how derelict the system was, how widespread the resentment against Ayub. Our people feel the pain of privation and yearn for the happiness of their children. Bhutto stated in the affidavit he filed in Lahore's High Court 5th February 1969, 1 month after his 41st birthday. Their poverty is unimaginable, but yet they hope for a better future. Starvation has dried the milk in their mother's breast, and suffering has dried many a father's tear. It is not the law of God that our people must live eternally in despair and that their children should die of disease and want. Our people demand a better life for themselves and for their children. They want food and clothing, employment and protection. Here was the Sufi prisoner of conscience turning to God for help in answering people's prayers because the ears of the government were deaf and the hearts of officialdom cold. Deny them their rights, Zulfi warned, and they will find a redeemer, and if none is available, they will redeem themselves. No plan for change is needed when the people seek it. The mood of the people is the plan, but arrogant functionaries, oblivious of this, want only to find solutions for the regime's perpetuation. He saw himself now as the people's redeemer, no longer constrained to listen to his secular manifesto draughtsmen like J.A. Rahim or socialist pundits like Mubashir Hassan, for he, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, was attuned to the blood of the people, sensed it in his heart, his spirit, through the mystic bone of love he felt for all the people of Pakistan, and which they, especially the poorest, neediest, wisest, most devout among them, felt for him. The classical excuse of colonial masters, whenever subject people have risen against them, has been that all the troubles are due to a handful of political agitators. This government would like to make the world believe much the same sort of thing. Stripped of the maze of prejudice and fabrication, the truth, radiant in its clarity, stands as my witness when I say that neither I preached violence nor hatched a plan to instigate the students. This regime, which has slandered the word revolution in describing its coup d'etat, celebrates a revolution day each year, but has the temerity to punish people for uttering that word. Democracy exists like the fragrance of a spring flower. It is a melody of liberty, richer in sensation than a tangible touch, but more than a feeling. Democracy is fundamental right. It is adult franchise, the secrecy of ballet, free press, free association, independence of judiciary, supremacy of the legislature, controls on the executive. Under the canons of this regime, the printed word is in disgrace. The franchise, limited to individuals subject either to intimidation or allurement. The body of the law contaminated by arbitrary acts, and the right of assembly in ashes in the furnace of Section 144. This is the depressing reality, but this does not necessarily mean that a change is not possible without violence. Popular opposition to Ayub and his regime had spread during the last months of 1968 and in early 1969, both in the East and West Pakistan. A general strike closed down Pindi for a day in late November, and police continued to clash with students and workers, while the army watched warily from its barracks. Little more than a week later, another general strike paralyzed Dhaka on 7th December. This time, police fire drew young Bengali blood, and radical Maulana Bhashani, whose National Awami Party was ideologically modeled on Maoist doctrine, issued a call for the complete shutdown of East Pakistan in mid December. Mujib's Awami League endorsed Bhashani's call, and soon all the small shops and businesses of East Pakistan closed their doors.